Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing really well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gordon Liao. I'm one of the 6 founding board members of AIM. We started in 2006. And I'm also the current vice chair of AIM. Really appreciate everybody joining. And on behalf of the rest of the board, just want to thank everybody. This is our second installment of what we're calling the AIM Virtual Series, which is a 3-part series created to keep all of our network, all of you, our AIM members and longtime partners connected to all the issues affecting our industry in lieu of our typical annual conference, which we usually hold at this time of the year. So for those who do know me, you will be missing my typical ad-libbing and improvisation because we are on a tight time frame today. So apologize for that. You won't get a little bit of that. But without further ado, let me just do a quick introduction of our program today, and then we'll get started right away. So we're going to start, first of all, with the Q&A between our esteemed sponsor, Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo Investment Institute's Greg Maddox, and my fellow founding board member and AIM co-chair, Brenda Chia. Then we'll move into a fireside chat with me and Mei Lee Tam, one of my great, great friends and mentors, who will talk about her personal journey being the only Asian American woman to reach the top of an all-male, nearly all-white power elite in Sacramento, the California capital. Following Mei Lee, we'll hear from a panel of extremely accomplished young professionals on how to navigate the investment management field and successfully raise a fund at less than age 35. It's too bad that they're all older than me, because everybody knows I'm only 25. Just kidding. And finally, we'll finish the session by hearing from Anita Hossain, who will be joined by my good friend Deepa Patel Madani, who will share her unique career story and provide tactics on how to thoughtfully design your trajectory and create opportunities that didn't previously exist. The last few minutes of each session will be dedicated to audience Q&A, and we encourage all of you to participate by submitting your questions to virtual@aim.org or Twitter via #AIM. And to be clear, AIM is AAAIM. So without any further ado, let me turn it over to my good friend and first speaker, Brenda Chia.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you joining us from the West Coast. Welcome to the AIM virtual event dedicated to emerging leaders. I am Brenda Chia, co-chair and founding board member of AIM. We have an exceptional announcement today. We are unveiling the capacity building partnership between Wells Fargo and AIM to accelerate the focus on and growth of emerging managers. This is a game-changing partnership for the AIM network. To discuss this with me today is Greg Maddox, Head of Global Manager Research at the Wells Fargo Investment Institute, a subsidiary of the bank. Greg is responsible for managing a global team of investment professionals charged with screening, selecting, and overseeing the money managers used throughout Wells Fargo Advisors, the private bank, Abbott Downing, and Wells Fargo's Institutional Retirement and Trust Division. The team oversees approximately $500 billion in assets. In addition to serving on the Investment Institute's Risk Oversight Committee, Greg chairs the Due Diligence Committee and is a member of the Global Investment Strategy and Investment Risk Committees. Over the course of his career, Greg has helped create and distribute over a dozen different mutual fund, variable annuity, and hedge fund products for organizations such as banks, insurance companies, and independent investment advisors. He has served as the Chief Accounting Officer, Treasurer, Vice President, and President of many of these funds. Some of you may be interested to know that Greg majored in finance and minored in Asian studies in college. He lived and worked in Japan in the 80s and now lives in San Francisco with his wife and 2 children. Greg, a very warm welcome to you. I have a few questions for you today to help us better understand diversity from the Wells Fargo perspective.
Thank you, Brenda. On behalf of everyone here at Wells Fargo, it's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Shall we dive right in?
Please do.
As your team works to screen, select, and oversee money managers used throughout Wells Fargo, what stands out for you in terms of diversity and inclusion efforts?
Well, for starters, I think as an industry, it's clear that we've got more work to do, Brenda. Of the 70 trillion in assets under management by U.S. asset managers, for example, today, less than 1% are managed by women or minority-owned asset management firms. Through our work in the Wells Fargo Investment Institute, we've learned that even though many diverse asset management firms have comparable track records and performance to non-diverse firms, they often lack the access to the necessary networks, relationships, capital, and technology, which are key success drivers in the wealth management space. Disparities in these areas over time have led to vast differences in the number and the size of the diverse asset management firms across our country. Whether it's defining the problem, measuring progress, or in some cases, even acknowledging that more needs to be done, Wells Fargo believes the urgency and the importance of this discussion needs to increase. This is why I'm so excited about joining you today and discussing what's going on in this space and the new partnership that we forged between our two organizations.
Perfect. That speaks right to the mission of AIM, Greg. So I'm very excited about this. Today's session specifically throws a spotlight on emerging managers within our industry and how to nurture their professional growth. What types of efforts does Wells Fargo have underway to support young professionals in the industry?
Thanks for asking, Brenda. Wells Fargo's got a number of exciting initiatives underway. I'll highlight just a few of them for your audience today that I think might be most relevant to them. First, Wells Fargo's leadership understands and values the power of diversity as a core business principle. Brenda, I can't tell you how important that leadership coming from the top on a topic like this is today. Creating an environment where everyone feels welcome and included is not only the right thing to do, it also makes good business sense. Wells Fargo attract and retain the best talent to help us compete. Diversity and inclusion initiatives start at the top, and I think Wells Fargo is a leader in that regard. Second, Wells Fargo offers undergraduate and graduate nearing their graduation access to world-class internship and employment opportunities in all parts of our country in areas that our business is experiencing the most growth. Many people are surprised to learn that Wells Fargo, 45% of Wells Fargo's entire US-based workforce is ethnically diverse today. For more information about some of these opportunities, I encourage anyone that's on this webcast today to visit wellsfargo.com for more information. Third, Wells Fargo is also committed to ensuring that our hiring practices remain fair and objective and do not systematically include anyone from consideration based on their race, gender, physical ability, or even their sexual orientation. Finally, and this is most exciting to me, as you've mentioned in your opening remarks, we're very excited to announce today a new and important partnership between our two organizations that I think is going to make a real difference in addressing the vast inclusion gaps that persist today, particularly in the United States.
Greg, this is truly, a groundbreaking effort, and I applaud Wells Fargo for the partnership with AIM. What does success look like for you and Wells Fargo in terms of our collective effort?
Brenda, my hope is that through our new partnership, AIM and Wells Fargo together can expand our efforts to identify, evaluate, and promote the utilization of diverse-owned asset managers, as well as diverse-led investment strategies throughout every area of Wells Fargo. Earlier this year, a number of senior leaders across our company, including myself, launched Wells Fargo's first Diverse Asset Managers Initiative. It's a multi-year plan to invest internal assets with asset managers who are from diverse backgrounds, including minority populations and women, while increasing visibility and building capacity in diverse-owned asset management firms. The initiative's objectives include improving the process for placing internal assets with diverse asset managers, improving access to networks, and providing assistance with technology and capacity building. The efforts are being led by Regina Hayward at Wells Fargo, who's assembled an outstanding team and is working with a network of nonprofit organizations like AIM and others to address systematic structural issues that operate as barriers to diverse asset management inclusion in the industry today. This initiative supports the D&I commitments made by Wells Fargo's executive leadership team made earlier this year. Like AIM, Wells Fargo respects the rights of all people, values diversity, and is committed to equality. We value and promote diversity and inclusion in every part of our business at every level of our organization. So Brenda, on behalf of everyone at Wells Fargo, we look forward to working with you and everyone that is part of the AIM organization on this very important initiative. Our organizations have so much in common, and I believe that by partnering together with one another more formally, we can make a real difference.
I couldn't agree with you any more than that, Greg. Thank you for your time today and Wells Fargo for the partnership. We look forward to working closely with you and Regina and your colleagues at the bank.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you to Wells Fargo. Thank you to Wells Fargo again, and thank you to Brenda and Greg. We really, really appreciate it. And again, reiterate, thank you to Wells Fargo for our support. I am joined now by my very good friend, mentor, and I call her my godmother, Mei-Li Tam. Thank you, Mei-Li, for joining us. I think Mei-Li's bio is very well known, but I'll just go through it very quickly. Mei-Li, as most know, is one of our two co-founders of AIM. She also served on the CalPERS board for a number of years in the mid-2000s, and she's very well known for her 20-year career in the California State Assembly, first as the first woman to serve as Chief Administrative Officer of the California State Assembly with Willie Brown, and then also the first ethnic minority to serve as Chief of Staff for the President Pro Tem of the Senate. More importantly, Mei-Li recently wrote a book called I'm Not Who You Think I Am, and you should go out and get it because it is amazing. And it really is an amazing memoir about a really great, illustrious career and so much that we can learn from Mei-Li. So thank you, Mei-Li, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Maybe the first thing that we'd love to ask, and just for the rest of the group here, is why write a book? And why'd you decide to become an author?
Well, first of all, Gordon, let me tell you what a pleasure it is to speak to AIM and how much pride that I have to see what has happened to AIM to emerge as the national voice of Asian American investment managers. And that's really thanks to you and Brenda and the founding board members for taking this concept and making it so successful today. So I congratulate all of you and I congratulate AIM. AIM is actually part of my book because I decided, it was a 25-year project, and I decided to write the book because so many people have asked me, because of my fortunate opportunity to excel and accomplish in the world of politics, as well as Asian Pacific American political leader. And I thought perhaps I wanted to share a number of things. One, I had a very unusual childhood that I never discussed, but my unusual childhood really contributed to my abilities and skills to excel in politics, leader, Asian American issues. I also felt that I wanted to share my experiences of how lucky I was to have the opportunity to climb the ladder in probably the most powerful, influential, dynamic environment of politics in the state capitol, which governs the #1 state in the nation, to share how I developed the challenges and skills to master those two positions of breaking the glass ceiling twice. And then I also wanted to share the coming of age of Asian American politics during a time, and that's starting from the 70s to the 90s, where Asian Americans were actually invisible and did not have a voice in the political process. And what we did to try to change that history of Asian Americans. And I guess lastly, I've been asked so many times, how did you do it? What did it take to accomplish what you accomplished? And I thought I wanted to share that journey with Asian Americans because I wanted to illustrate that as accomplished as people think I am, I made mistakes along the way. And I really had to face a lot of challenges. And by sharing that experience, I was hoping I could make it a little easier for the next generation who seek to succeed in whatever professional goals that they were seeking. So the book has many purposes, and it's been very well received, and I'm just appreciative that I was able to write the book only to leave something for the next generation so that they could learn from my experiences.
Yeah, well, we thank you very much, Millie. So I've read the book. So let's dive into it a little bit. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, you did have a very unusual upbringing out there in Hawaii, and then later more formatively in Northern California. So maybe you can just kind of dive into a little bit about your background, how it affected you positively and negatively, and talk about advantages, disadvantages, and then maybe just kind of start talking about how it applies to the future generations of Asian Americans.
Actually, and it's something, strangely enough, I didn't discuss, because some of the childhood experiences I had was somewhat painful and yet somewhat rewarding. I was born into to parents who were Chinese Cantonese opera entertainers. My parents were trained and groomed to be artists from the time they were born, because they were born into generations of Chinese artists who performed in the Cantonese opera. And this was during the 40s, and their lifestyle as celebrities really didn't lend them to becoming parents. So what they did was very traditional. They farm out their children to be raised in either foster homes, or they farm out their children they send them back to China to be raised by family. In my case, and I was born in San Francisco, I was at the age of 2 weeks, I was sent to a foster home that was managed by a European French Basque family. I stayed with them from the time I was 2 weeks to 8 years old, and was really privileged to a different European upbringing, where they really promote self-esteem in their kids. They're very passionate, they're emotional, they really encourage open expressions and self-expressions. And it just so happened that they always bragged about their smart Chinese kids that they were raising. There were a number of us. And I grew up feeling that because they bragged about me, that I was very smart. And that kind of gave me the feeling that I needed to be smart to have value, because I didn't have any parents to validate self-worth. So being smart was the way to go. I think that after my 8 years with the foster home, my mother moved me out to different Chinese environments in Chinatown so that I would learn the Chinese culture and learn how to speak Chinese. And from 8 years on, I was moved to different home environments. I was not raised by my mother, and I did spend about 3 years with her, but I was pretty much on my own by the time I was age 14. I was financially supported by my mother, but I was on my own from 14, graduated from high school when I was 16. I had skipped 2 years in school, and at the age of 16, my mother told me, "You're on your own because you have your high school diploma." And being that my mother was a singer in gambling dens, it's a whole history, so I'm trying to fast forward here. I couldn't apply for scholarships even though I graduated with honors. I was a valedictorian, but my income for financial support came from illegal gambling dens. So I couldn't qualify for scholarships, which meant that at 16, I was pretty much on my own to decide what I wanted to do. And I knew college was the key to success. So I worked my way through college from 16 on. And I have to say that being on my own at that young of an age really taught me some basic skills that I felt benefited my professional my professional objectives. And some of them is that one, I had to learn quick to develop social skills to be accepted in school because I had such an unusual family background. And I also learned that I had to be adaptable. I had to study people. I had to participate in as many social activities, as many leadership activities in school, because I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be seen as normal. And this constant striving to achieve, because it was the only way I would gain recognition, really played a role in my professional career and my professional aspirations, and actually succeeding in politics. Because you can see very early on, I had to learn how to play the game to be accepted and how to play the game to succeed from the time I was 14 to finishing my college career. So integrating my very dysfunctional childhood gave me a sense of independence, gave me a sense of being the master of my own destiny. And I think it helped me as I went on into my professional career.
Great. And again, let me reiterate, to learn even more details about Mei Li and her development in her early formative years, please, she didn't even ask me to put a shameless plug, but please go to Amazon, buy the book. It's really, really, really good and really worth it. So let's turn into a different topic, which is obviously very near and dear to my heart, Mei Li. So as most people that are familiar with AIM know, I am the founder and kind of head of what we call the Emerging Leadership Initiative within AIM, which is focused on kind of that next generation of Asian American leaders within the investment management world. And that came up much because of Mei Li's encouragement of me. When I was in business school getting my MBA, I did a paper which really focused on the glass ceiling for Asian Americans. It was focused on the C-suites in corporate America. And it found that statistically there definitely was a dearth and underrepresentation. And it really tried to get into why. And that was really a big part of why Mei Li and I met nearly 20 years ago. And when we started AIM together with our 4 other founding board members, we really decided that having an emerging leadership initiative focused on the next generation was incredibly important, because we need to have a voice. As a community, we need to make sure that we always have a seat at the table in all of U.S. society, and within the investment management world was really a very important part of that. And so with her encouragement, we started it. And this whole series, as you guys know, is really focused on emerging leaders. And that's why we've kind of managed and organized the panel as we have. And so towards that end, Mei Li, maybe you can kind of give the group here just a little bit of lessons learned, or your view about kind of the glass ceiling, or the bamboo ceiling as some people call it, for Asian Americans, and how your experience has taught you things that you can pass on to others in terms of getting to the C-suites, getting on boards, getting to the senior partnership levels within the industry.
I think, and Gordon, you're right, we really bridged on this subject. In my 40 years in my professional career, I realized several major barriers that Asian Americans face, and it has a lot to do with the difference between the Eastern philosophy and the Western philosophy of cultural values and traits that we are taught as Asian Americans. I did a lecture at Oxford and Cambridge discussing this issue, the difference between the Eastern philosophy of leadership versus Western. And as you know, our Asian community sometimes, especially since so many are immigrants, they have a tough time adjusting to the fact that meritocracy is really not the rule in Western society. And sociological images factor in to what the Western society feels are leadership qualities. And Asians tend to excel academically, intellectually, but we're not quite seen to be socially skilled. And let me tell you, and I'm very much, by the way, not directing this to everyone. I'm just saying the general perception that I have found in my career of what sometimes holds us back. For example, we're told to respect authority. We respect our elders, a wonderful quality. But then in the Western society, in a competitive society, that sometimes is seen as being yes people, that we acquiesce and we pay so much homage to authority that sometimes it works against us. Secondly, I think we understand that we value being consensus builders. And yet in the Western society, sometimes that's seen as being indecisive, or perhaps lacking creativity, or being afraid to stand out. And then many Asian Americans, especially the new immigrants who come, are taught to be reserved and taught to be somewhat emotionally restrained. And the Western society sometimes sees that as a lack of passion or lack of enthusiasm. Modesty, humility, something we all value, and I still value to this day. But then sometimes I see that hold back amazing, talented Asian Americans because they let other people take credit for their work, or they don't quite know how to promote themselves. Where in the Western society, the one who promotes themselves gets attention. They're the nail that's out of the board. The fear of loss of face is another trait that we grow up with, which is why we definitely sometimes find it hard to get Asian Americans to run for office, because they're afraid of the win or lose, and the adversity to taking risks also has to do with the fact that we have a fear of losing face, and there's comfort in conformity. But to be a leader, they don't look for conformists. They look for people who want to stand out. I think these are some generic issues that face our community when we compete for the C-level, or when we're being passed by for leadership, or maybe to get the best deal that's available, they'll give it to someone else who they feel much more capable. And yet Asian Americans are just as capable. So in discussing those generic differences, I kind of want to share how I did it in the state capitol. Because when I came in, I was one of 2 Asian professionals in a sea of 1,200 white male-dominated environment. And as I told you from my childhood, the way I felt that I had value of myself was to achieve and was to stand out so that people would accept me. So I was a super achiever, unabashed. And when I first got into the Capitol, I said, I'm going to navigate the cultural environment. Who are the influence makers? How are decisions made here? What's the power structure? So I really did my homework so that I could learn how I can possibly assimilate into an environment that I was a stranger to, and people didn't know how to treat me because I was an Asian woman, So I had to be much more aggressive in learning to acculturate into that environment. And what I did was I studied influential leaders. I sought the advice of the elite professional staff. I was not hesitant to say, I don't know this, can you teach me? And I found that really helped me create a network of support that I was willing to ask. I also found that I wanted to interact and become a main part of the culture that dominates politics. For example, I went beyond my duty of responsibilities. I actually participated in extracurricular activities. For example, in the Capitol, to gain value, people can volunteer to work on campaigns. I did that. anything that would make me seem a part of the mainstream culture of the Capitol, I did. And finally, I used every opportunity to try to make a difference, to try to add value to the institution. I didn't want to be defined just as an Asian American woman. I wanted to be defined as a staff person who could bring value to the Capitol the way no one else could. And I found it. I found it because there was a void of Asian Americans in the Capitol. We were invisible. While people were talking about Blacks and the Latinos, no one talked about Asians. And here I was in the seat of power and had influential connections. This was the time that I thought I should help play a role to help my own community take advantage of my having access in the Capitol to raise their voice. And I did that by creating workshops and institutions, going out and suggesting to Asian Americans to participate, to learn about the legislative process, to run for office, and to seek positions in the Capitol. And how that added value to the Capitol was that they are starting to see Asian American issues emerge. They were starting to understand that this invisible voice had issues. And guess what? They vote and they give money. So I was able to not only use these skills to help myself move up the ladder, because as I became an Asian Pacific American leader outside the Capitol, my leadership skills were becoming obvious in the Capitol. So that helped me in both ways. And even though I have to share, which I did in the book, even though I became Chief Deputy Administrative Officer of the Capitol in the Assembly for 7 years, I was asked to promote 3 CAOs to be my boss during my 7 years as a Chief Deputy, right? Quite prestigious, but not prestigious enough to become the top CAO. And CAO is like a CEO of a company. So finally, I was starting to lose my self-esteem, even though everybody said, oh, you're so lucky to be an Asian woman in such a prestigious position. And I was letting them define me of what success was. But to myself, I said, if I could train 3 CAOs to be my boss, I should be able to achieve that position. And so I worked for a very strong person by the name of Willie Brown, who's known to be one of the most powerful, influential leaders actually in the country. So I decided when I decided to seek this position to meet with the speaker, that either I was going to lose my job and leave if I didn't get the top job, or I was going to become the CAO. So when I went to meet him, I said to him, I think if I am skilled enough to train 3 male CAOs to be my boss, I should be successful enough and skilled enough and talented enough to become the CAO. And he looked at me for the longest 60 seconds of my life. And he said, what took you so long? Which shows and validates what I've been discussing, is that we have to take risks. And in my case, even though I had a good track record and I was emerging as leader, I still had to take that last step to promote myself. So I think that my own story demonstrates what I had to overcome. And let me tell you, being the CAO as an Asian woman was a huge challenge in itself. But that's a whole different story, because I think you're more interested possibly in what I feel are skills and talents that can help Asian Americans succeed in whatever career they seek. I will tell you, however, in interacting with the wonderful, amazing talent that I have met through AAIM, is that many of the personalities of Asian Americans who go in and finance an investment, and you're one of them, Gordon, Brenda Chia, and we got Clayton, all of them. You have, I would think, a more advanced skill of being able to overcome some of the Asian barriers that hold us back. Because to succeed in your field, in finance and investment, you need to have those social traits to command and to negotiate deals and to close the deals. It's a very public figure that requires assertive personality. So I feel that the professionals in AIM are kind of a step ahead of a lot of Asian Americans in different fields, whether it be engineering, whether it be academics, even in the medical field, education field, that the personalities I've met in the field of finance and investment have a certain bravado that it takes to be successful.
Thank you,
the way, yeah, I really see that. So
and Mei Li, I apologize.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to cut it off there. Apologize. We're
That's okay.
No problem. Everybody in the audience, I would just say there's so much more to talk about. Please buy the book. Mei Li is somebody I've known for almost 20 years. She has a wealth and plethora of knowledge. She's so wise. And so I would definitely say that there's just so much more to learn from her. And so I'd actually absolutely recommend everybody get to know her. And hopefully everybody learned a lot from this session. And without further ado, we're going to move on to the next session, next panel, moderated by my very good friend, longtime supporter of AIM, and current board member Johnny Wu of Plinth Capital, for our panel, as I said, with these very old first-time fund managers. So Johnny, take it away, man.
Thank you, Gordon, and I hope everyone can hear me well. We have a little less than an hour, but what I would say is we could probably spend 4 hours, like an hour with each panelist here. I have 4 amazing individuals with us, and I think we'll be in for a treat. I tend to talk a lot, so I'll try to shut up and let these folks talk because they have so much to share and so much to say. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and do introductions. And Gina, I would like to start with you. If you can give folks a bit about your background, your organization, where you went to school, etc. I think that would be very helpful.
Sure. Thank you, Johnny. So I'm Gina Baker Chambers. I currently work for Artemis Real Estate Partners, and I actually joined Artemis right after finishing Columbia Business School in 2009. So a wonderful time to graduate and look for an opportunity, especially in real estate. But it really did present an opportunity for me to join a team that was just launching a new platform. I effectively joined Artemis 3 weeks after they officially, the core team of 3, so I became employee number 4, and had the opportunity to put on my real estate principal investing hat after having spent 2 years at business school and 3 years at Fannie Mae prior to that. And so Fannie Mae was my introduction to real estate, but very narrow piece of the industry, and that really motivated my desire to go to business school to transition more into the investment or development side of the business. And so that's sort of me in a nutshell, not taking too much time.
Thank you. Amy, let's move on to you, and if you can provide some background on yourself as well too.
Hi, thank you, Johnny. Hello, everyone. My name is Amygou. So I run a venture firm called Hemi Ventures in San Francisco. So Hemi was founded 4 years ago, and I am the founder there. Before that, I work in tech industry, actually. So I work in quite a few Silicon Valley startups. I grew up in China, actually near Beijing, and then started computer science before I moved to Hong Kong afterwards. And then I think from there, I had a chance to visit the States, and then fell in love with it. So then applied business school and came here to study my MBA in Stanford in 2007, and also graduated in 2009, same time with Gina, and then definitely interesting time. And then after that, I went back to China to work in tech industry again. And then later on, joined a company called Evernote to head this China operation. So then in 2015, I moved to San Francisco to think about my next step. Then, venture capital kind of came to something that I think could be interesting. So then I started Hemi in 2016. Actually, it's also 2016 where I had my first interaction with AIM. So I met a lot of wonderful people here, learned a lot. It's my honor to be here, I think 4 years after, to share my experience with you guys.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Kevin, I'm going to move to you next. Kevin's actually joining us from Taipei. It's almost 2 o'clock in the morning there, so thank you for that, Kevin. Go ahead.
Yeah, bad lighting. So Kevin Ma, I'm one of the 2 co-founders and managing partners of Versus Capital. We're a enterprise software buyout shop based in Los Angeles. We started Versus in 2013, so it's been a nice journey since then. Prior to that, I was at a middle market private equity fund. Prior to that, I was in strategy consulting at Boston Consulting Group, and then Wharton undergrad, as well as a electrical engineer. So that's a short background on me.
Last but not least, is my man Andy. Andy's got like his baseball cap, like he's the rebel of the group, right? We're gonna pick on him a little bit later, but Andy, give us some background on yourself.
For sure. Thanks, Johnny. I'm from the middle of nowhere, Illinois. Attended school. Had the opportunity to attend school a little earlier than most. I went to college when I was 15. And to my dad's chagrin, he wanted me to be either an engineer or a lawyer. I wanted to be an archaeologist. Unfortunately, he won, so I had to pick something. I ended up picking business. When I graduated, I was too young to know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I did a master's in taxation. And the only reason I did that was because I had an open book examination and no classwork. Fast forward a couple of years, I did investment banking, then private equity at a firm called Lone Star Funds, and then started Parallaxis almost 4 years ago now. And lo and behold, I run a fund that buys tax assets, which is esoteric in many ways, but a pleasure to connect today.
Okay. Awesome. That's great. And thank you all for the brief introductions, because we can go on and on. But look, there's so many of these virtual conferences going on, right? I think, the one thing I want to do is, if I do a good job, is be able to pull something that people remember and that they can take with them, right? So, as Gordon had mentioned, right, the Emerging Leaders Initiative, right? It's all about, inspiring, young leaders within the industry on learning from people's successes, right? Oftentimes you hear from, folks that have been, 30, 40 years in the business, folks like Mei Li, who, she just got me pumped up, right? Like, she's such an inspiration. But I think, in this session, what we want to do is be able to kind of grab from you, and people remember stories, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that, right? So Andy, let's start with you. So we'll go the other way now, right? So, dude, you're a young guy, right? And you started your firm. Like, you're kick-ass, man. You're like I want to introduce my son to you to kind of get figure it out, right? But what drove you to do what you do, right? So talk a little bit about your fund. How much money do you run, right? People want to be you, right? So yeah, go ahead.
Look, I would articulate that we've been extremely lucky and fortunate, and we stand on the shoulders of giants like Mei Li. From an AUM perspective, we run almost $200 million across 3 of our flagships, as well as several of our other vehicles. There are about 5 of us at Parallaxis. And look, I would say almost my entire life is an accident. Like I said, I wanted to be an archaeologist to start off with. I did a master's in taxation, driven by a desire not to go to school. And then when I was at Lone Star being a larger firm, today approaching almost 90 billion in AUM. They were looking for esoteric strategies, and so I had brought this there, and it was ultimately too small of an opportunity set for the firm. And so several of the managing partners were great in that they allowed me to leave on my own and were extremely supportive as I embarked on this. And look, we initially thought we were going to do things deal by deal. We had the opportunity to partner with a large family office. Ultimately, we were able to remain independent and raise our fund one. That was almost 3 years ago. We've since raised a fund each year, and we've been extremely lucky. But it's been a long journey.
Yeah. So that's like the Asian thing. Oh, it's luck, dude, man. You did it. That's awesome. Like you saw the opportunity, right? Very unique. You took risks. So we'll come back to risk in a second here. Kevin, tell us a bit about your overall business, right? How much money you run? How many people do you have in your team? What's your competitive advantage? What makes you different, right? Like, why did someone write you a check, right?
Yeah, no, good question. So in terms of AUM, we're about $350 million right now.
You're a little bit soft, Kevin. So if you could.
Is it soft?
Yeah, that's better. That's better. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, total AUM, we're about $350 million across both our fund one and kind of pre-fund deal by deal. So when we first came to be in 2013, we started in that deal by deal kind of structure. So every single time we wanted to buy a company, traditional buyouts, we raise money from institutional LPs, family offices, kind of pass the hat around, and that was a really kind of scrappy type environment. And then several years later, once we kind of proved the track record, had proven that we built the team, person by person, I think that's what encouraged us to raise our fund one, which we raised last year, kind of 6-month fundraise. Our team size is about 14 investment professionals right now, just split between both the M&A as well as business development. People are finding deals across the board. And then we also have another arm called, business operations, which is executives, CEOs, CTOs, COOs that really help us transform our companies and kind of guide these teams over multi-year period of time. That's about 20 some professionals that we have there, and that's expanding over time. So, what's our competitive advantage? We're very focused. We're focused on a sector which is, fortunately very hot right now, especially given what's going on with the pandemic, et cetera. Enterprise software and, I guess tools that enable fast innovation, being able to be agile, turning on a dime, that's becoming more and more important in this day and age. And we're small, we're nimble, we're looking for companies with founders, we're looking for, carve outs of public companies. We've done a couple deals there where, the owners, founders telling us, hey, look, I can't take this. I don't have the attention span or the resources to take this small company to where I need it to be. And that's where our investment team and our operations teams comes to play and really shepherds them to the next level.
Okay, great. Thank you. Amy, let me ask that question to you. Tell us a little bit about your business. Like, why did you start it? During your introduction, you said that the founders, and you're like, well, I founded it. Like you should be pounding your chest, right? It's like I'm pumped up. I want to hear about your story, Amy. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Johnny. So the reason I say founders is just because in our business, it's mostly about startup, right? So literally everyone are founders. So they're in my life everywhere. I think for me, I always wanted to be a startup person. So whether it's on the startup or company side, or whether it's on the investment side, this is the place where I feel very comfortable. When we are founded, I think the reason is a lot of, so I just actually quit from my last startup. So I'm thinking about what's the next thing to do. And then a lot of startups came to me for advice. And then there's one point that I feel like I couldn't really advise 10 startups at a time. And also you just, do not really have that much of upside. Then, I was thinking maybe starting a VC could be, something really interesting because I have the access and pipelines to all those wonderful startups. So that's how it got started. I think I didn't really think I know 100% about the venture capital business. And then I think after that, I literally advised all my friends is do not really start a VC immediately. If you are just out of school, or if you just got into your career for a few years, if you're young, do not start a VC because it's tough. But then, unfortunately, I think we raised the money. We managed our first fund of roughly 30 million, so small size. But we have invested in 31 companies, and then in the past 4 years, we had 4 exits. So it's very, I think, fortunately for us as a first time fund, but then had a chance to have our portfolio be acquired by public companies or private companies, and then generated some multiples for our investors. I think one of the key sort of learnings for me is, when I started Hemi, I think one question I asked myself is, if you do not really do this, will you regret in 10 years? And then my answer is yes, so I just got started. So it's been pretty fun so far.
Great. That's great. We're going to dive more into that whole startup experience in a second here. Gina, let me come to you. So Artemis, employee number 4, and I remember back in the day, right, Artemis and New York State Common, right, had a really good relationship, and you guys care a lot about diversity, and that's you guys have moved the needle, right? And when I first got involved with AIM, right, I was like, what's this AIM thing, right? One of my buddies was like, oh, you should get involved. I was like, what's this AIM? So I go to the conference, and I just got so much energy. I looked to my left, I looked to my right, and it was more about just promoting diversity, right? So I love it when I see women in senior level positions. I love it when I see just more diversity, right? So that it's just not all white men, right? And I love white men too, right? But it's great to have a lot more diversity. So when I think about a firm like Artemis, I mean, it's done so much. So talk to us a little bit about your progression there, right? So Columbia Business School, I went there too. You and me, we're peeps. But talk about what and you've got promoted to a very senior level there. What's been your experience in the success that you've achieved there?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So our co-founders are Deborah Harmon and Penny Pritzker, who were two of very few women very senior in the real estate industry for 25 years. And so just built into the culture of the firm was we want to ensure that our employee base has talent and that it's representative of who our ultimate customers will be and clients will be. And that's predominantly public pension funds, which the pensioners are very diversified. And so that was an attractive element of the opportunity for me as well. I'd say key to my success has really been raising my hand for new opportunities and then doing a damn good job at it, right? So if you could produce, people will give you more. And sometimes if you take the most challenging opportunities or the opportunities that have less clarity about how to get to the end, and you figure out a way to get it done, you can be rewarded for that. And so I think, that's been part of the key to my success at Artemis, is really just kind of rolling up my sleeves, figuring out how to get it done. And also reinventing or being open to new opportunities. So I am the rare millennial who has really only had 2 jobs, or worked at 2 different places. But that being said, I've had an opportunity to do many different jobs. So the requirements of Artemis in the first 2 years versus the requirements in years 3 through 5 versus the requirements over the last 5 years have been, have evolved. And my ability to evolve with those opportunities, and requirements has I think positioned me to be in a position where I'm now kind of, either solely or co-responsible for our emerging and diverse manager separate accounts and funds, which really is half our book. So we've, gone from 0 revenue, $0 raised to about 4.7 billion today, and 2.3 or so of that is all in this emerging and diverse manager space.
Sure. That's awesome. Yeah. One of the things that Mei Lee had talked about was, after she trained 3 people to be her boss, she finally came out and said, hey, how about me? Right. Like, the thing I like to say is, don't ask, don't get. Right. And Gina, you seem to be an asker. So that's awesome. Right. Because sometimes people are like, oh, I've been waiting for you to ask. Right. But the other thing I think is very important, right, in terms of, when I think back to my career, right, and I'm not as accomplished as you folks, right, it took me, so I'm 48 now, it took me, over 26 years before I said, oh, let's just do something entrepreneurial, right? So, but it's not for everyone as well, too, because there could be a lot of risks, right? But I think Amy, you said something which was, will you regret it, right? Because doing a startup, the risk of failure is high, and I can talk about my personal experience at any point in time if anybody wanted to reach out. So Amy, like for you, my next question is for you. Did you have that $30 million kind of like soft circled, or was it done when you said, okay, I'm going to do this? Or was it one of those things where you said, okay, I'm going to do this. I think it's going to happen, but I'm going to take risk. And, what was that risk? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting sort of experience. I didn't have all the money committed when I started the fund. I do have two friends that they want to invest in it. So I can, soft circle with them. And then interesting enough, I have one friend dropped out after I started Heavy. So basically, that was like a down moment for me where, I feel like, oh my God, what I'm going to do? Whom I need to talk to. So I think that's probably the moment where, again, you ask your question, you ask yourself, will you regret? Then you said you're not, then you just go for it. So I tried really hard to talk to a lot of people. Actually, I think along the way, I have a lot more investors who are interested, whom I never talked before. So they heard about it, and then they think it's interesting, and then they made the investment, I think, in a few months, which I think for us is fortunate. I do think, this is, I think the hard work I have done before can pay off when, people learn about, you're doing something that are really interesting, and then you're committed to, and then they believe in you. So that trust for me is very important in the beginning, where I think, I had my previous work, known by, some friends and, companies. And so they think I can do also a good job when I started Hemi. So I think along the way, the key word for me is definitely trust. Whatever you're doing every day, for example, today attending a conference call like this, or, having an in-person meeting with someone else, it's all the, kind of your capital, your trust capital. And then you can deposit all those trust capital in the bank. And then one day you're going to need it. So I think when I started, I got lucky in terms of we don't really have all the, firm commitment. But, along the way we have, friends, and then the people who know my work kind of like started to trust in us.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. So Kevin, I'm going to come to you. Tell us what almost went wrong. I'm sure something almost went wrong, right? Give us a story, or you may have many examples, right?
There's tons of those, right? I think just, I mean, what almost went wrong. I mean, I'll tell you one story, right? When we first came out, our very first deal we ever bought. So this is, we were not taking salaries. We were bleeding down our meager saving accounts. Just every month goes by and everything's on the line. And our very first deal did not go well. Did not go well at all. And it just kept, it was a heavy turnaround situation. It was a bow and arrow company, literally manufacturing bows and arrows, so archery equipment. And we took it in. It was a tough ride. Just a lot of management changes, going in there, sitting as interim CEO, all kinds of things. And right when we just won Walmart as a customer, did all these great things, and kind of on the up and up, we actually the whole company burned down, literally burned down. We had a factory fire, electrical fire, and burned the whole thing down. So I remember I was in New York, and it was like 3 or 4 a.m. my time, and I got a call from one of the operating partners saying, "Hey, Kevin, it's on fire." I'm like, "That's great. What are we selling?" It's like, he's like, "No, it's actually on fire. It's actually burning to the ground." And I just was like sitting there, and he sent me videos. I'm saying like, "What do I do?" Right? And it kind of went to insurance collection mode and all that. And so there's a lot of, I can recount so many stories of big customer does this. I mean, private equity is all about rolling up your sleeves and slugging it out, right? And it just pain tolerance, right? Never giving up and saying, I'm going to live by another day. And we found really clever ways to, just fight our way back and make our money back on that deal, which is surprising. No one expected that, and our other deals just went really well. And so it's never easy. Nothing is as easy as it looks from the outside in. And I think that tenacity is kind of what kept us going, right?
Okay.
And we always like telling that story. People don't believe it, but it actually happened.
Yeah, you need grit to be successful over a long term, and
Absolutely.
that's awesome that you guys had that. It reminds me of a story. And so Clayton Jew, who's on the board of AIM, and he's been a board member for many years. Before I started my kind of business, I talked to him, right? And he's like, Johnny, he's like, are you sure you want to do this? I said, yeah, Clayton, tell me a bit about yours. Don't you run like billions of dollars? I was like, I want to be you. He was like, okay. All right, there, lad, come on over. Let me tell you. He's like, when he started his business, he talked to a few investors. He thought he was going to raise, some money, right? Started his company, and the money just never came, right? And then I was just like,
so many times.
and he's like, I was like, what? Okay, so that's fine, right? And he's like, no. He's like, it didn't come for 3 years. He says by year 2, if I remember the story correctly. And I don't know if he shared this with me privately, but I'm going to broadcast it anyways because it's such a great story. He's like, I turned to my wife and I said, I think, to paraphrase, it's like, I wouldn't blame you if you left me, right? Because he's like bleeding through all his savings and he's just like, this is what I want to do. And he knew how to, and then finally, of course his wife supported him and et cetera. And he got it done, right? And like to this day, I like that story just sticks in my head. But like, there's risk involved, right? But like, you got to have grit. Andy, let me turn over to you, right? So you said esoteric assets, dude. Are you like 20% returns, right? Like I'm helping you market here, right? So you're,
No.
I'm kidding. There's a lot of pressure, but no. So you go after stuff that like other people kind of don't know about, or that you can source and originate. So fairly unique, I'm sure, right? So tell me a bit about that. Tell the audience a bit about that. Oh, we can't hear you, Andy. Oh, now we can. Yep.
Oh, cool. So I would articulate that I'm very lazy, and I'm always looking for the most efficient way to do something. And so, look, I think life is about figuring out where you have a competitive edge. And pretty quickly, when we were at Lone Star, we identified several things that made, as it pertained to this asset class, that made it difficult for others to compete against us. And so, namely, that was domain expertise, the fact that most tax professionals don't really speak English, the fact that most deal professionals hate anything and everything to do with tax. So that was the first barrier to entry. The second barrier to entry was the duration of the vehicle. So we have a 21-year fund. And you can probably appreciate that's pretty darn long for most private vehicles. Literally, I think I went into a few conversations where like, are you even sure you're 21? I'm like, I'll take that as a compliment. And the last aspect of the size of the opportunities. Typically, we are in the $10 to $15 million zip code. And so as we thought about that, like there were natural barriers to entry, and our job is to make it difficult to compete against us. Might that be making it being easy to deal with our counterparties, and over time, just owning the market. And so it's a small opportunity set, but as we think about it, it is one of several things that we're going to do long term. And our job is to be fiduciaries of the money that we have today. And over time, we will get incremental degrees of freedom from our LPs as we demonstrate the ability to return capital to them.
Right. That's great. I mean, that's, to use a Warren Buffett term, right? Like you have a moat around your business. You guys have domain expertise. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Good story there. Gina, let me turn to you and talk about advice, just in terms of navigating the corporate ladder, right? I think one thing that you talked about is even though you've only been at 2 organizations, you've done different things, right? So doing the same job for too long, I think number one, you kind of get bored, but also I think something that people don't recognize is that there's someone else, quote unquote, beneath you that want your job, right? So if you stay in your job, right, you don't create room for other people to kind of move up as well, right? So the people that historically that I've liked to work with, or the folks that are talented, are the ones that are more flexible and amenable to, like, doing and the same thing, right? And like, I don't think I ever broadcasted. I tell people, if you've been in your job for 5 years, I would probably fire you, right? So I say that for a fact. I don't, yeah, but give us some advice for, like, how do you climb that corporate ladder? How do you get promoted, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really does fundamentally start with whatever job you have, like whatever's in your description or you were hired to do that job first and do that job well, and then moonlight, right? So if you can get your quote unquote day job, although I hate that term, done, and there's other interests that you have, you should take those other interests in your free time, your spare time, your extra hour, your extra 2 hours a day. And when you can then show folks that you're producing at what you were hired to do, and you're also creating something new of value for the organization, that's a great way for you to position yourself for new opportunities. So maybe you've been working on the job you want, or maybe you've just highlighted that you have the capability to multitask in a certain way that actually is valuable for a role that maybe you didn't even think of for yourself. And so I think it's important that you perform in whatever you're supposed to do. And also, and this was very difficult for me when I was much more junior and younger, but to promote yourself. I mean, a lot of the things that Meili said from a cultural perspective, I could relate to, even though I don't share the Asian culture with many of you, but I those were also ingrained in sort of me, unfortunately. I'm not a great self-promoter, and I had to get comfortable doing that and ensuring that I had at least one more senior ally within the organization, whether that was a formal sponsor or not, who could advocate in the rooms where I wasn't present. And so I think that's really important as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's very, very good advice. Amy, over to you. In terms of, what do you think, if you think about the audience, and some folks wanting to be you, right? Like launching your own fund, doing 31 deals is kind of what I've heard. Having exits, right? Which technically you made a lot of money for your investors, so kudos to you. What was the most important thing that that rings in your mind? Well, like, what advice do you give to aspiring entrepreneurs or folks that want to start their own first-time fund?
Yeah, I think everyone has different paths, right? So do not want to be someone else, because that may not make you happy. I think one thing I learned during this pandemic is really find your inner happiness. So I read a lot of books during this time, where I think for me, this job is perfect for me because I'm always curious about things. So I think in the VC business, it's all about the intellectual curiosity. You meet a lot of people, a lot of startups. So we invest in the newest technology. So from AI to autonomous vehicle to biotech, healthcare, so a lot of new technologies out of research labs or different academic groups. It's just fascinating. So for me, that's something I feel sort of very satisfied or happy when I'm doing this every day. So I think then this job is perfect for me. But everyone's different. So I think when you're in private equity or in real estate, your happiness came from something else. So I think find that the point where you feel like this is something that can bring you happiness. I think that's probably the key when you think about whether to start a fund or join a fund or do something else. And for me, I think that was, something I like, meeting new people. I like learning about new technology, and then investing in them. And that makes me happy. So a VC fund is perfect for me at that stage.
Yeah. And Amy, you probably said this, I don't recall it. How many people do you have on your overall team then?
So we have roughly 7 venture partners, and then we have 5, 6 sort of administrative people that we work with. Some are full-time, some are part-time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. And just a follow-up question. So the 7 venture partners, did you know them all before you started, or were these people kind of you meet because you see all these opportunities?
Yeah, they have all different backgrounds. Some are new, some are people I just met when we started, doing this. A lot of them are my friends, classmates from business school. And also we have two venture partners that are, once our portfolio company CEOs, and then after their exit, they joined us as a venture partner to help us source and coach portfolio. So I made a lot of, friends, and then getting to know a lot more about, the people we work with is really satisfying.
Got it. Got it. So do you only like fund Stanford people, or are you
No. We invested in quite a few companies out of East Coast, so New Jersey, New York, Boston, Midwest, like even North Carolina, Michigan, etc. So it's everywhere. We also just invested in a company out of Korea, out of Taiwan. So our footprint is actually everywhere. Because technology is everywhere. So it's exciting in a way. I wish I can share more about what they're doing. So it's fun.
So I would like to ask you a question. Reading your bio, Robinhood.
Yeah.
So what's your involvement with Robinhood, and what's the inside story that you're going to share with the AIM community that people would like to know that you know?
About trading or?
No, about Robinhood in general. I mean, did you help advise them in the beginning when they were starting up? Yeah.
Yeah, so I started advise their China business in the 2016 time period because they are trying to figure out about China, what they should do in China. So I spent probably 6 months with them on the ground to help them form partnership. So that's after my Evernote experience. And also I advised another company called Udacity, which is online education company. So I think Andy mentioned, a competitive edge. I think that edge is very important. If you want to start your fund, there's got to be something you can do the best. Like people will rely on your advice. And I think at that stage where I think for any kind of China stuff, people say, oh, go to Amy, ask for his advice. But China is huge. I don't think I'm expert, but I got kind of superficial brand there. And then people come to me for advice. Robinhood came that way. And they are smart. They're probably the smartest startup I've ever worked with. Very hardworking, very hardcore, move really, really fast. So I learned about how to operate kind of a top tier startup also from that experience as well.
All right. I hope you got some shares as well too. So, cha-ching! There you go.
Exactly.
So Kevin, on the topic of luck, what percentage of your success would you attribute to luck? And you can say none because I'm the man.
Like,
yeah.
No.
No. But talk a little bit about
luck.
how did
Alrighty.
it play in your success?
Man, luck is a piece of everything. I mean, as much as we're all perfectionists, we like control for everything. It's impossible to control for all the variables. So there's little bits of randomness in everything we do. Look, I think the thing I'm most grateful for are, and I'm sure a lot of you guys share the same sentiment, is the people you meet. Is often chance very random conferences, random phone calls, somebody you run into in an airport, and that's probably one of the most important things it takes to start something is being able to trust the team. For me, the one thing I did have was a great co-founder, right? We met at a prior PE fund. But everything else, the investment team was a mix of just luck and chance and people introducing the right people to our fund. And every person has an X factor that can bring something really dynamic to a portfolio company, to a decision you're making, helps find a deal. And I think you really have to, meet a lot of people, talk to a lot of people, and like kind of luck guide that aspect of decision making, right? So yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't have an exact percentage for you, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm rotating. I'm coming to Andy. Like there is like I don't know Andy, right? But like, dude, I love Andy because the guy like he beats by his own drum. It's his own rules, right? You got like Zuckerberg with the hoodie. You got Andy with the baseball cap, right? Like I want to give you more money, but so how much capacity do you have? Like, are there deals to be done beyond the 200 million that you run then?
Yeah, look, I think it's about creation of a market. Like if you think, one of the books I recently read was Predator's Ball. If you think about the junk bond market back then, that was a $13 billion market. $13 billion is issued like almost daily now, what we have in junk bonds. Like if you're trying to create a market, that just takes time to bring both supply base as well as a demand base together. And so we're trying to create a market in tax assets.
So when I was at these large organizations for many years, right? It's like, someone like Andy, like I would probably have to spend a lot of time managing. I'd be like, dude, you got to put your tie on, right? Like this guy, he's not that, but like you could tell that, he's looking at his computer screen while we're doing this, right? But he's he's a go-getter. I love that about him. But that's what entrepreneurial ism is, right? It's like you guys have each individual skill set. You're following your passion. You don't have to do performance reviews. Well, Gina does, right? Yeah, so that's one thing I think is kind of very interesting. So, I've got a couple of questions from the audience. Audience, if you folks have questions, please feel free to kind of shoot them in. Yeah, so let's go to one of these questions here. Actually, why don't I come to you, Kevin? So given that you look relatively young, right? When you're out like talking to investors, has that ever been an impediment for you in terms of people saying, "Oh, you're too young to be a founder," etc.?
I think early days before, we're doing fundless sponsor and we're raising money on a deal by deal basis, they never actually say it to your face because, it's kind of weird. But I think you get the feedback back that maybe you're a little bit young to be doing private equity. Because think about private equity and buyouts, right? You're managing CEOs, you're managing, people who are much older and much more experienced, right? And, part of the, value creation is, hey, do you know what you're doing, right? And I think that's a big piece of this whole question. And to that, it was always the answer of, why do companies like BCG, McKinsey, and Bain exist, right? They go into companies and arguably that company knows more about that industry than they do, right? They're seeing it from scratch, they have a little bit of context, but I think a fresh perspective is often kind of what people are looking for and drives a lot of change, and that's always been a big piece there. But, I think people are used to, young people stepping up and really coming to bat. When we first raised our fund, it was like, yeah, feel pretty young to be doing this, but I think you look around and there's great stories. I mean, there's great stories just in this room today, and I think people in general are getting used to it. I think there's a new wave of new kids on the block. They're smart. They found their niches. They're working hard, and they're changing the system, disrupting the system. And I think that's happening in different industries. And I think more to come.
Great. So I have an audience question here that anyone can take. How have the events of 2020, specifically COVID-19, impacted your work and your overall business strategy? Gina, can I come to you for that?
Sure. In the real estate space, obviously, it's been a disruptor in many ways. But the one thing we've been doing, and a lot of our peers, quite frankly, is just bifurcating, high impact asset classes versus more moderate to low. And so, just taking a much more cautious approach to product types such as retail or student housing, potentially even traditional office, particularly CBD office for the time being, and thinking about, maybe industrial, since e-commerce is really, industrial is the new retail in a lot of ways, just given the reliance on e-commerce during this period of sort of work from home and quarantine, although that may be lifting a bit. And then obviously thinking about multifamily or other residential options, whether that be single family strategy or something that gives people a little bit more space as they try to socially distance in a meaningful way. So there's a lot of opportunity that'll be on the other side of this, but just approaching those opportunities cautiously because there's still a lot unknown. We still don't really have a second stimulus if we'll even get it. And so what does it look like when you think about the loss of jobs, many of which are not predicted not to return? So what does the new economy look like, post-vaccine? Is still, the jury's out. So just we're being very cautious, which I think most folks in the real estate space are.
Got it. Okay. Does anybody else want to take that question? I have other questions as well. All right. Amy, I'll come to you. So this question is from the audience. What advice would you give to female aspiring entrepreneurs trying to launch their own funds?
So
female aspiring
entrepreneurs, I guess.
right? So it's hard enough to launch, right? And then like being a woman, are there like additional challenges? Right. And so what advice would you give a female aspiring entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think so. Really think about it. I think launching funds is not easy, right? Is that really something I think you're inspired to do for the next 10 years? I think that's probably the first question people need to ask themselves. And then I didn't realize fund is a very long-term business when I started. I thought this, startup, 3-4 years, come and go. But no, this is a very long-term thing. So really think about, is this something you want? And then after that, I think 3 things that people need to think carefully. One, I think I just talk about it. Whether you're good at something, you're maybe good at marketing or technology or knowing specific things that people will rely on you for advice. I think that edge is very important. Second, find the mentors. I think mentors is something for females. Sometimes it's difficult because you tend to, just ask yourself questions. You tend to think. You don't really, go outside and ask for help. And I think for female, that's very important. And then I'm fortunate that, when we started, I probably got, 4 or 5 formal, informal, informal mentors that, I got on the call all the time, say, hey, what's this career about? And then like, in this specific terms in the LPA, should I negotiate for this and that? And then those are people with 10, 20 years experience, and then they give me great advice that I'm still remembering today. And I think the third thing is find people who trust you. Really have a pen paper and then list the people who really trust you for the next, again, 10 years, give you the money without really asking for the return every day. I think those are the important factors. So edge, and then mentors, and then the people who trust you.
Ooh, those are very few and far between. Write you the 10-year check and call me later. I wish. Yeah, I'm kidding.
Yep, you understand.
Andy, actually, I think you wanted to respond to the question around events for 2020, like COVID, and how it's impacted your work. Did I read your body language right? Or
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Look, it was probably for our firm like the best thing that could have happened. Look, I mean, we're a relatively young firm, and so for many younger firms, there are LPs want to see you go through a crisis, and we pass with flying colors. And so alongside that, we also got 6 deals done in March and April. So that served as a harbinger for us long term. I think that period really tried the team. And we came together. So I was extremely thankful for that. But look, I mean, if you think about where everyone is shelter in place, working from home, and everyone has responsibilities, right? Our job is to put as much space between us and the next guy over. And that's what we did. Like, we took the time to really try to take the additional hours gained from commuting and put as much space between us and the next guy over, to the point about creating more of an edge long term.
Right. Okay.
Can I also add one thing?
Sure, go for it.
So I think another thing which is important for us is this is bad time for everyone, but I do think as a fund manager, talking to the LPs and then, communicating more often to the LPs are very important. So I think on our side, we actually probably send more newsletters to our LPs during the pandemic, just talking about, what we have been going through, in California, in other places, what our portfolios are doing, and then really have that kind of, picture layout in front of our LPs. And then I think people sometimes underestimate the importance of communication, especially in bad times. And then for us, I think that's extremely important. We communicate good and bad. Companies are doing well, but companies that are probably not going to do well. So we spend a lot more time actually during COVID than pre-COVID.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to go to each one of you with this last question, from the audience as well too. Actually, it might be from an AIM board member, but it's important. Paying it forward, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of people that have kind of helped you in your career, right? And part of the reason why you took time to do this session, right, is you care about like AIM as an organization, the whole kind of getting more diversity in the industry as well, right? So for you, how do you try to pay it forward? Is it like every person that asks you for a mentoring meeting, do you take that? Do you go help do talks like this? Do you AIM a check for sponsorship? Not haha, hint hint. But talk a little bit about that, right? So let me start with you, Gina, if you don't mind here. So paying it forward, how do you look at it, and how do you do that?
Sure. In a variety of different ways. I mean, one organization near and dear to my heart, in addition to AIM, really is the Twigo Foundation. And so ensuring that I make time for any talk to new fellows or any way to support my fellow alumni, I definitely do. But just generally, whether it's AIM, Twigo, we run our own summer enrichment program at Artemis. I always make my contact information available, and I say, please reach out. You would be surprised how few people actually take you up on such an open offer. And so the folks who do are the place where I spend my time. And so I'm willing, if you're going to take that time to reach out and with a thoughtful request for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I'll probably give you 30, and we'll see where the relationship goes from there. But and that whole concept of radical candor, I wholeheartedly believe in. We have to boost each other up where appropriate, but we also need to provide folks with constructive feedback so that we can be that much better when we get in front of the next person.
Okay. Wow, you're gonna have like a ton of emails then. But no, that's awesome.
I probably won't. You think I will, but I really won't.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Amy, let me go to you.
Yeah, so I think especially this year, I started to spend more time on one-on-one meetings with female founders, and then also kind of new sort of fund managers, just share with them what I do, and then the experience, the lessons I learned, just like my mentors did to me 4 years ago. So I'll try to keep, I think, more relationships like that, just ongoing as a way to pay back. And then I think, again, back to the AIM, I think I got a lot of help from people like Cindy, Ginger, Majari in the beginning, and then now I think this is time for me to share my lessons. I think most licensed to the people who are up to do something similar.
Yeah, and even for selfish reasons, right? When you take the time, I remember interviewing a girl who went to, this is when I was still at an investment bank. She went to Princeton, and she was like a rising junior, and she happened to get through the interview round, and I interviewed her. I thought she was fantastic, but like I was like, well, what did you? She told me about her life story and like how she worked her way up to be like the manager. She didn't grow up with much money, and she worked her way up to being like a manager of like a local McDonald's, right? And just so inspiring, right? Like being able to like she's very successful. It wasn't because of me, right? It was just you just feel good, like, oh, if I could just steer this way a little bit, it's just so rewarding. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, one thing that we also did, I think is also helpful, is to hire more interns. So we just hired actually a second year student out of Brown University, female as well, to do some research work for us. So I think by doing more of that, then they see, someone else, similar, leading a firm, then they can learn that, I think, from their real life.
Right. Kevin, same question. Paying it forward. What's your view there?
Yeah, paying it forward. I mean, a lot of great things from both Gina and Amy. I think interns spend mentorship, reaching out to, there's a lot of college kids in, USC, UCLA, and around that are always reaching out, emails, asking for advice. So try to make time for those calls when I can. What I'm noticing a lot more these days are a lot of people spinning out of big shops, right? It's starting to happen, big waves. I don't know if you sound like you guys are seeing that as well. A lot of people are looking out saying, I want to do something entrepreneurial. And I think being there and being connected to, that community of people in finance who are trying to make a name for themselves or hanging out at Chipotle, I think that's really rewarding, right? Because so many things that you've learned just through hard mistakes, and things that you wish you didn't do before, and think that just saves a lot of time, gets them a higher probability of success, and it's rewarding me to kind of really get it together and say, hey, that was actually really good advice, it worked out, and those are things you can do, little small things that I think go a long way.
Yeah, I think the one thing I learned is people like to invest in people that they like, right? And so I think philosophically, if you extend yourself and expect something in return immediately from that same person, personally, I think that's the wrong way to do it. It's, if you're branded as someone that likes to help folks, whether it's karma or whatever, what goes around comes around, you never know who's going to help you. People just pay it forward. So I think something very important. Andy, over to you. Paying it forward.
Yeah, look,
You're rich, dude. You gotta share the wealth, buddy. Come on.
I highly doubt that. So I mean, to the point about, look, I'm extremely long-term greedy. What I would articulate that I can be an ass to work for, and my entire team knows that. I expect a lot out of you, but I expect even more from myself. And for the people that I chat with, I'm more than happy to make an intro for you. But every time you come to me, I want to see you having made progress, and I want, if that is creating a new page of your deck, moving the ball forward for what you want to ultimately become. If that's independence away from your mega fund, to Kevin's point, I want to help you achieve that. But it's never gonna be something life isn't about steady and up to the right. Most of life is gonna be extremely volatile. And my job is just to be there whenever you fall, and so that I can be a friend there. So trying to be a friend when possible.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we are done. I thought this was awesome. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you chuckled and laughed at some of my dry jokes here and there, so it wasn't as boring. But I want to thank each one of our panelists, and hope you stick around for the next session as well. So we're going to conclude, and now I'm going to welcome Deepa and Anita. So going live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Anita. Thanks, Johnny, for the introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for taking the time to join this virtual conference today. Hopefully you found this informative. We've heard from a lot of inspiring and accomplished individuals today, and we thought we would use the remainder of the time to provide a bit of tactical insight as you navigate your own career. By way of introduction, my name is Deepa Patil Madani, and I'm on the Emerging Leadership Initiative Committee here at AIM, and I'm the head of IR at One Rock Capital. And prior to joining One Rock, I was on the fundraising side at TPG and General Atlantic, and started my career in investment banking at Lehman Brothers. I graduated from Georgetown, where I met our guest here, Anita Hossain. We were actually roommates in college and have known each other for more than half of our lives, which I think gives away our ages. Sorry about that. Anita is the co-founder and CEO of The Grand, a modern platform for group coaching. Since I've known Anita for so long, I've had the pleasure of witnessing all of Anita's different careers that she's pursued, and I thought it'd be great to have her share her experiences with all of you and provide some advice for all of us as we think about our own career. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you, Deepa. So excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So jumping right into it, you've gone from a career in private wealth management to acting to venture capital and now starting The Grand. Can you walk us through your own career progressions and transitions?
Yeah, I'd love to. To start, I want to say that storytelling and community has been a through line in my life. And so it started when I was a young kid growing up in Wisconsin. And my parents are from Bangladesh. And the way that they connected us to their culture was really by telling stories, to being able to transport us there and share more of their culture with us. And they also built community by with other Bangladeshi families. And so I saw just how powerful that was firsthand. And I think that's what instilled in me this interest in building community, this curiosity and being drawn to people and their stories. And so when we were at Georgetown and I graduated, I started working in private wealth management. And again, having a deep interest in helping people and helping them achieve their goals. About a year into that role, I found this opportunity to go to Ecuador on a volunteer project with a nonprofit. We would use our business skills to help this nonprofit. It was the height of the recession, and everyone told me, Anita, don't go. This is not good for your career. Just, lay low, do your work. And I still was really drawn to it. I was really compelled. And so I decided to go talk to my boss about it. And I was in Ecuador for 2 months. And it was one of the best decisions I made, because when I came back, I was able to meet the head of the LATAM team. And eventually he was able to hire me on his team as the only non-native Spanish speaker. And it was so hard. My job was 100% in Spanish, and it was really challenging, but it was well worth it because it taught me how to really adapt, and that I had grit and I can do it. I enjoyed it, but I knew I didn't want to be there forever. So naturally, I started applying and thinking about going to business school. But at the same time, we're in New York, and I had this itch to pursue acting. I'm sure you remember. And so I did that for a bit. And the really cool thing was I would go around the city going from audition to audition. So very different from my day-to-day in finance. And I was really vulnerable, putting myself out there. And the cool thing is in acting, or I guess the interesting thing is in acting, the default is rejection. And so more often than not, you're going to hear no, or you might not even hear back. And so I think that really helped me develop this thick skin and helped me become really comfortable putting myself out there, no matter what the outcome was going to be. And so I ended up going to Wharton, and I decided to focus more on the behind the scenes. And I worked in media and entertainment for a bit while I was there. And then I also started a community called Storytellers that allowed people to get out of small talk, like how was that party or how was that test, and really share who they are and what they value. And it started as something small, but grew to be the largest organization on campus. And I'm really proud and happy to see that. After business school, I made the decision to move to California. I'd never lived there before. I thought, why not? Let's try something new. And so I packed one suitcase, bought a one-way ticket, and I showed up. And that's where I was able to land the role at First Round Capital in a really cool role. I was the head of knowledge. What that meant is I worked with all of our portfolio companies, really understood what challenges and pain points they were going through, and I would design hundreds of interactive experiences for them to learn from each other. And through that work and working one-on-one with founders, I was able to parlay that to become an executive coach for startup entrepreneurs. And I saw just how transformative these resources were. Having a peer group, being able to really talk to someone about what's going on vulnerably, helped everyone feel less alone on their entrepreneurial journey. And that was the spark that made me realize, okay, this is only for founders. It's for C-level executives. I wanted to build something that was for all people, all stages of their career, all ages, all geographies, to really come together, find the support that they need, and build a community, especially when they're navigating big career transitions and life transitions. And so that's what led me to start The Grand. It's, like you mentioned, a modern platform for group coaching. And the interesting thing there is we started with a 14-week group coaching experience called Quest on navigating a career transition. And as you can see, my career, I've bounced around so much, and I can tell look back and now tell the story in a more seamless way. But a lot of those moments, I felt really alone. And, a lot of those times it was scary making those big pivots and jumps. And so what really helped me was having a strong community and peers to really talk about it. And so that's what I built with the Grand.
That's amazing, and it's been amazing for me to watch your transition and as you've evolved your career, and now, as you said, like looking back, it seems to have all it's like a nice puzzle that fits together. But I'm sure in the moment that it was challenging.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that background. That's very helpful. And I guess as minorities here, we often struggle, just pivoting the conversation a bit. As minorities, we often struggle to get noticed at work. I mean, how have you navigated this challenge with your positions and various jobs?
Yeah, no, I know Gina in the last panel was talking a little bit about this and talking about promoting yourself. And I would say for me, similar to maybe a lot of you who are listening, and Deepa, you as well, as a South Asian female, I was taught by my parents to be really humble and to work really hard, and the work would speak for itself. And early on in my career, when I was working in finance, I had that philosophy in mind. And so I would spend long hours, I would be heads down working, but I would produce really great work. And so when the review cycle came up one year, I thought, okay, for sure I'm getting a promotion. I deserve it. And at the time, they would just send out an email with your name on it. You didn't actually know if you were promoted or not. And so I remember getting the email. I went through the list and I didn't see my name. And I read it again and I was like, okay, this is insane. Like, I did so much work. I really deserve it. And that was a really good turning point and lesson for me that you don't just need to work hard, but you have to come up for air and tell people what you're doing and really share and get to know people in your org. And so from that moment on, what I did is I would create this one pager that listed out my accomplishments and also the impact that it had on the organization. And I would share that with my boss and get confirmation. Did he agree with all of that? And if so, will I be up for promotion? And if not, what areas could I work on in the next 6 months so that I can get there? And so what I did is I took my career back into my own hands and really learned how to advocate for myself and what I was doing and the impact that it had. And so that really I took to heart and really helped me.
No, that's really helpful, and I know you've been a great advisor to me as well in my own career, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, when we're in school, we're taught that if you worked hard, you get good grades, and you move on. And sort of in the real world, I think people are rudely awakened to the fact that it's not always like that. Just because you work hard doesn't actually mean that you'll get to the next level, and that one has to be an advocate for themselves, which is a little bit unnatural for a lot of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess so. I think the other thing that's important in addition to being an advocate for oneself is also just the networking, both within your firm and within your company, within your industry. And I think we all would agree that there's a huge amount of power with networking, and which is why we're sort of here today as well. How has networking helped you in your career?
Yeah, well, I want to start by sharing a stat with you. So 70 to 80% of jobs are actually never posted online, which is wild. Yeah,
when
right?
You told me that, I was like, really? Is that true?
Yeah, and that means what that means is most of it is done through internal promotions and through networking, and so that's why it's so critical. And Kevin's point before in the earlier panel about just meeting as many people as you can, I truly believe that you never know who you're going to meet who might change the trajectory of your career and of your life for that matter, and so just keeping your eyes open for those opportunities. And so networking, it's been really pivotal in my career, and I'll share two quick anecdotes about how. One, when I was in business school, I was in a management course, and one of the guest speakers that day was the global head of HR at Viacom. And I was really impressed with him and his talk and his career. and went up to him afterwards. And I asked, I see that Viacom has a big mission in social impact. Is that an area that I, as an MBA intern, can work in? And he looked at me and he's like, MBAs don't normally want to work in that role, but, let's chat. And so we scheduled a bunch of meetings to connect. And, over time, he got to know that I speak Spanish. And he told me, you know what? You should go to Miami. The team is very lean, and you're going to have a much bigger opportunity there. And so over several months, we crafted this role where I would work for MTV and Nickelodeon, Latin America, on their social impact team. And so it was perfect for me. Like, they created it for me. And it wasn't a job that was posted online. It wasn't something that they had available. And so
this goes back to being an advocate for yourself.
Exactly. And like taking the time to put yourself out there and just ask, like, not be afraid to do that. And so I spent the summer working in Miami, launching incredible projects. One of them, I worked with the government of Mexico and created an anti-child labor campaign that we launched at their version of the VMAs in Mexico City. And again, like, what a dream job. I would have never had that opportunity had I not talked to this guest speaker in my class, right? Yeah.
Right. And it can really change your life in terms of what city you live in and like what path you end up following.
Yeah, like another story. So I would say the most recent story of this is when I was at First Round, I organized a small group conversation on coaching, and I invited an executive coach who had his own company. He came in, and I was really just blown away by how he was rooted in data and science and research. And he brought the emotional side and the psychology to the conversation. And I, again, was, asked him, hey, do you want to grab lunch? I want to catch up about your career. And over several months of just, checking in, I asked him once, if I want to be an executive coach, what do you recommend I do? Is there another career path I should take? And he said, actually, in venture, it's really great because you have access to all these founders. You're working with all these companies. So you have a really good vantage point. But there's this course I recommend you take called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which is all about how our brain makes meaning from our past experiences and how to create resources so you could take certain actions in the future. Super intense course. I ended up taking it over 6 months. It was 1 weekend a month, but I loved it. And after that, he actually hired me at his coaching firm part-time so I can just get my feet wet, see if I like it. And that put me on a whole different career trajectory, became an executive coach. And then that's also what inspired me to start the Grand. And so again, had I not asked, I would have never even known that these opportunities were available.
That's great. Those are great anecdotes and stories. Thank you for sharing. And I guess one story that I would share on networking as well is the way I got my job at One Rock is actually just through networking. And I happened to Gina's point earlier on the panel. She had mentioned, you can put yourself out there, and very few people actually take you up on that. And there was a woman, Lisa Lee, and she's at Providence now, but she's an IR, and I had a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for her, and so I just reached out to her proactively. I saw her at a conference, and do you mind grabbing coffee? And so we grabbed coffee, and I told her I was looking for an investor relations role and wanted to go to a smaller firm, and we ended up talking for almost 2 hours that day.
Wow.
And, we scheduled for 30 minutes and sort of we ended up, hitting it off and talking for a while. The next day she emailed me and said, actually, my friend is looking for a job, and her friend was the managing partner at One Rock, and it sort of changed my trajectory as well. So it is crazy. You never know what one path leads. There was somebody that told me, you need to meet 100 people to find your next job. You need to really spend the time and get to know people, and you never know, and really invest in those relationships. You can't always expect something to come out of it right away, and you just don't know what will happen later on.
Yeah, totally. It's a long-term game for sure.
Right. And then also, I think that prior panel touched on this, but giving back, giving back to younger folks, or giving back to the community in general. So I think that's important as well. And I guess more tactically speaking, because of COVID, in-person networking is not happening anytime soon.
Mhm.
I mean, how do you suggest people to network in this sort of new virtual world that we're all living in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a couple of trends that people can take advantage of. One, yes, conferences aren't happening in person, but a lot of people are moving virtually, like AIM, right here. And so I think that creates a bigger opportunity where it becomes suddenly more accessible. And so I think it's worthwhile for people to think about, okay, what are all the areas that you're interested in, and where are the, 2 or 3 conferences I can go to virtually, and then actually follow up and connect with 2 or 3 people that you meet there. And so people are doing great things where, they're having breakouts, or if you see a group of panelists and they actually say, hey, reach out to me, actually take advantage of that. And so I think that's one thing. The other trend is a lot of people aren't traveling as much, and so maybe have more time and are more willing to talk to you, even if you reach out cold. Of course, some people might be burnt out from all the Zoom
Yeah.
interactions, but I do think that people have a bigger appetite. And so I would say, again, same theme as before, just ask, don't be afraid. But if you do ask, make that ask very specific. You don't want them to feel like you're blasting 100 different people with
Yeah.
the same email. And so really tailor it to that person. What specifically about them interests you the most, and what do you want to learn? And the other thing I would say to remember, and this has been really helpful perspective in my life, is that people are just people. They're just humans. And a lot of times when we reach out to someone who's in a position of power, like a CEO or an influencer or a fund manager, we almost have this feeling of fandom, like, oh, it's, it makes us nervous. We might not put our best foot forward because we're not being ourselves. And so Dale Carnegie has this great quote: to be interesting, be interested. And that always resonated with me. You don't have to impress the person that you're meeting. You really just need to make a real human connection with them. And to do that, it's really more about asking questions and openly sharing who you are as well. And so I think just having that framing and that mindset really goes a long way when you are meeting someone cold that you have no context or no prior relationship with.
Anita, I will say you have the skill of really getting to know people very quickly. I mean, sharing an anecdote from like college, it'll be like 3 a.m. And she'll be like, so what do you want to do for the next 10 years? Where do you see yourself? And she'll ask these deep questions, and you really do have a skill for getting to know people very well in a very short period of time.
Thank you.
I'm getting some questions already from the audience, so I'll start asking those. But what skills from your acting career would you be able to bring into your work in investment management, a field not typically associated with the arts? I mean, I guess how have you learned from all the different experiences you've had?
Yeah, I would say that in particular acting, and I do recommend a lot of founders to take improv classes, because I think the main takeaway there is being able to think on your feet, and not being so caught up when you do things the wrong way. There is no wrong way. And so that's probably what I bring into when I'm meeting people, when I'm pitching to customers, when I'm trying to hire someone, when I'm fundraising, just being able to be adaptable and really think on my feet. I think that is something that's really helpful. And then also just being in the mindset of acting, it is very vulnerable. Not only are you putting yourself out there, but you're trying to convince people that you're this character. And so I think just going through something so raw and vulnerable makes you more comfortable in when you just are yourself and you don't have to play this character.
Yeah, that's very helpful. It looks like this is going to be the last question. How has COVID-19 impacted the growth of the brand, or has it inspired new areas for your business?
Yeah, so previously we were actually meeting in person, and we had to quickly take our business online because we launched our first Quest program, which is our group coaching program, right in February. And what I learned and what opportunities it opened up is we were actually able to attract an international audience. And so it reminded me that a lot of the topics that we're covering, like changing careers or becoming an effective manager, it is universal. And so it's opened up a whole new door of people from all over, from Australia, from Shanghai, from Nigeria, from Ireland. And we have such a rich, diverse group of people who are bringing in so many new perspectives. And so I think that's one thing that absolutely has been impacted in a positive way. And then, other resources, we are going to continue to create new products so that people can connect one-on-one, no matter, again, your geography. You can find the exact person who maybe is in a similar role, but they're sitting in Barcelona right now. And so just that connectivity is something that's changed for the better.
Yeah, that's great. It seems like you've been able to be nimble and adapt to the environment.
Yeah,
what do
you
hope
have
to
to.
instill? Sorry, go ahead, Anita.
No, you have to be. I mean, that's
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, right? Yeah.
Right. What do you hope to instill in members of the grand community?
Yeah, I mean, I think our belief is that people feel the loneliness and they need community most when you're going through a big work and life transition and you don't have anyone to talk to. And what we want to instill is really reminding people that you don't have to do it alone. Community and belonging is a core fundamental human need, and we want everyone to have a peer support group, a community, accountability whenever they're facing the most pivotal moments in their lives. And that's more important than ever today in the environment we're in. And we don't want anyone to walk alone as they're making those big transitions.
Yeah, that's a good way to end. That's very helpful, and I agree. These are big decisions, and having a community to support one another is helpful as people make those transitions. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, Anita, to join us. I will hand it back over to Gordon, who will conclude this conference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Deepa. Virtual hand clapping for all of our speakers, all of our sponsors. Don't want to forget them. So thank you very much for that. And just thank you to all of you, for those that have stuck around for 2 hours. So again, in this crazy 2020 year, we didn't have our in-person conference, which for those who have attended know that it's a fun time. And you learn a lot, and hopefully this will be a way to do that virtually. Stay tuned for emails about our third and final session that will happen in the next few months. And I just want to conclude by just saying, really, I think what Gina said, which is radical candor, which is in this day and age, in fiscal year 2020, this crazy year of a lot of things that have happened, and in light of the social justice movements that have been going on, I want to remind everybody that 6 of us started AIM in 2006 to bring diversity to the investment management industry. Diversity for our community as Asian Americans, but really for all diverse communities. And as also a TWIGO alum and somebody that's very involved with many of our sister organizations around the country, I just want to encourage everybody, whether it's just breaking through ourselves and doing all the great things that everybody's doing here and our panelists, and then also just touching on a topic that we talked about a lot, which is paying it forward and making sure that we all do our part. And so with that, I want to just say thank you to everybody. Thank you to our tech staff behind the scenes that made this pretty seamless. Thanks again to all the speakers, panelists, moderators, and then thank you to the audience. And with that, we will sign off. Thank you.